The interstellar vessel SciFi drifted through the quiet void, its sleek frame reflecting the stars as it approached Earth's orbit. Inside, a group of alien students from the distant planet of Arthea gathered in awe around the observation deck, each of their 4 eyes absorbing the swirling colors of the Milky Way. For the Aryans, a species known for their intellectual pursuits and advanced technology, this journey was a rare chance to see Earth, a planet often discussed yet never directly explored. Zara, one of the youngest students on board, stood by the viewport, her gaze fixed on the blue and green world before them. Despite her extensive studies and the endless information about Earth, she felt a strange thrill at finally seeing it for herself. Earth, the name itself felt exotic, almost mysterious. As the small planet loomed closer, Zara could hardly contain her excitement and curiosity. "It's smaller than I imagined," she murmured, her voice a blend of wonder and unease. "But look at the colors, the clouds, the seas, the land. It's beautiful." Standing beside her, Professor Kalar, a seasoned explorer and historian, placed a supportive hand on Zara's shoulder. His elongated fingers were gentle, a gesture of encouragement that reassured her. Professor Kalar had been studying Earth's history for decades, and his knowledge of human conflict was extensive. "Yes, Zara," he said, his deep voice carrying a sense of reverence. "Earth holds more than beauty. Its history is rich with struggle, resilience, and survival. That's why we're here, to understand the complexities of humanity, particularly their history of warfare." Zara looked up at him, her eyes glistening with curiosity. "Why is Earth's combat history so significant, Professor? We have archives of other civilizations that have waged wars. What makes this planet so different?" Professor Kalar's gaze remained on Earth, his expression thoughtful. "The Aryans value knowledge and progress, but we lack the context of human history. Humans, Zara, are unique. They've endured countless wars, each with distinct motivations and consequences. The Earth's history of combat is woven into its culture, art, and even its progress. This mission will allow us to observe and learn, not to judge. It is essential that you approach this study with an open mind." The other students gathered around the viewport, each listening intently to the professor's words. They were all eager, prepared for this mission for years, and carefully selected for their curiosity and dedication to understanding Earth. The Aryan society, shaped by centuries of peaceful coexistence, found Earth's brutal history of conflict both baffling and fascinating. As the SciFi glided through Earth's upper atmosphere, the students were briefed on their destination. Their first stop was an isolated archive hidden deep within the Swiss Alps, a location that housed extensive records and artifacts from various periods of human warfare. Shielded from public view, this archive was a treasure trove of knowledge, containing documents, manuscripts, and relics that spanned millennia. The Swiss Alps themselves were awe-inspiring, with their jagged peaks and snow-covered cliffs. To the Aryans, unaccustomed to Earth's cold climate, this environment was both challenging and mesmerizing. Once the landing was complete, the students disembarked, stepping onto Earth's soil for the first time. They were slender, blue-skinned beings, with limbs slightly elongated and joints that moved with a graceful fluidity. Earth's gravity felt heavy, pressing on them more than they were used to, but they adjusted quickly. The air, crisp and cold, filled their lungs with a sensation both unfamiliar and invigorating. Zara shivered slightly, pulling her cloak tighter around her shoulders. She was unaccustomed to the biting chill, her home world of Arthea being a place of mild climates and stable weather. The towering, snow-capped mountains and the sheer icy landscape stirred something deep within her. A feeling of respect, perhaps, for the planet's raw beauty and harsh environment. Professor Kalar led the way, his eyes scanning the vast, rugged terrain. "Remember, students," he began, his voice carrying authority, "we are here to observe, not to interfere. Our purpose is to learn and document, to understand Earth's history and its people. Stay close and follow the protocols." The students nodded, their expressions serious as they took in his words. Entering the archive, They found themselves in a dimly lit corridor lined with shelves that stretched as far as the eye could see. Dust motes floated in the air, illuminated by the occasional flicker of artificial lights, and the scent of aged paper and polished metal filled the space. The atmosphere was almost reverent, a silent acknowledgement of the knowledge preserved here. Professor Kalar led them deeper into the archive, stopping in a large central hall where ancient manuscripts, digital records, and historical artifacts were displayed in glass cases. "This is where we begin our study," he announced, gesturing to the vast collection around them. "Each of you will be assigned a period of human history to analyze, focusing on the conflicts and their implications. Be mindful of the significance each era holds." Zara's group was assigned to study ancient human warfare, the early conflicts that shaped the foundations of Earth's civilizations. She felt a thrill of anticipation as she and her companions navigated through the shelves, their scanners whirring softly as they translated old texts and manuscripts into their native language. Every artifact, every relic, seemed to carry the weight of centuries, a testament to the resilience of those who had fought and endured. As they studied records of primitive battles fought with crude weapons and tactics, Zara's fascination grew. She read about wars waged over resources, territory, and survival, conflicts driven by primal needs. The brutality of these early wars surprised her. There was a rawness, a desperation in these battles that spoke to the very core of human survival instincts. "These humans were relentless," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "Their conflicts were so intense. They fought not just for power but to survive. It's unlike anything I've ever encountered." One of her companions, Aaron, nodded in agreement, his expression thoughtful. "It's as if their lives were defined by struggle. These wars weren't just about winning or losing. They were about enduring, pushing forward no matter the cost." Their scanners continued to pick up detailed records of early battles, from skirmishes between tribal groups to organized warfare among ancient kingdoms. The Aryan students were drawn to the strange mix of simplicity and complexity, the way humans had adapted and evolved their combat techniques over time. To Zara, the history of these early wars was a testament to humanity's resilience, a trait that seemed woven into their very essence. Professor Kellar joined their group, his eyes reflecting the glow of their scanners. "This is only the beginning," he said quietly. "As you delve deeper into Earth's history, you will encounter conflicts motivated by ideas, beliefs, and ambitions. The evolution of their warfare mirrors the evolution of their society." Zara looked up at him, her mind buzzing with questions. "Do you think we'll ever fully understand them, Professor? Humans are so different from us." Kellar's gaze remained steady. "Perhaps not fully, Zara. But by studying them, we gain insight not only into their nature but also into our own. Their resilience, their struggles, they remind us of our own history and perhaps even of our potential." The students continued their exploration, each relic and document adding to their growing understanding of humanity's complex past. For Zara, Earth's history of conflict was a window into the human spirit, a spirit that had faced both darkness and light. As they prepared to move to their next section, Zara felt a strange kinship with this distant planet and its people, a feeling that left her both humbled and intrigued. The archive's vast interior felt like a labyrinth of time itself. As Zara and her group moved through rows of ancient manuscripts, relics, and artifacts, the significance of Earth's combat history began to sink in. Each shelf was lined with artifacts that bore silent witness to humanity's earliest conflicts. Primitive weapons, faded documents, and fragments of armor, all relics from a distant past where survival dictated the course of war. Professor Kalar led Zara's group toward a section dedicated to humanity's earliest forms of organized conflict. Here, they found stone and bronze weapons from millennia past, blunt clubs, sharpened spears, and primitive shields made from hide and bone. The Aryans, accustomed to sophisticated tools and technologies, were taken aback by the rawness of these weapons. To them, these items were artifacts of struggle, symbols of a time when humanity fought with whatever was available, relying on pure instinct and willpower. Zara picked up a small bronze dagger encased in a clear display. It was rough and worn, its blade chipped and dulled by time. She imagined a human warrior gripping this very dagger, fighting for their life, defending family, land, or food. The thought sent a chill through her, and she quickly placed it back in the display. These weapons, Zara mused, looking over at Professor Kalar. They seem so basic, and yet they must have meant everything to the humans who wielded them. Kalar nodded, his eyes thoughtful as he examined a display of spearheads. Yes, Zara. In these early conflicts, there was no concept of large-scale warfare or organized armies. Each battle was personal, often fought to defend one's survival. The simplicity of these tools reflects a time when survival was immediate and primal. Every conflict, every battle was a matter of life or death. The group moved deeper into the ancient warfare section, discovering records that detailed the motivations behind these early conflicts. They found accounts of territorial disputes, where small tribes clashed over resources such as water, hunting grounds, or fertile land. One document, translated by their scanners, described a bloody feud between two rival villages, sparked by a scarcity of fresh water. Zara scanned the translation, her 4 eyes widening as she absorbed the details. They fought over water, something so basic, yet so essential. Another student, Aaron, glanced over her shoulder. It's remarkable. They were driven to violence over resources we take for granted. This desperation, it's hard to understand from our perspective. Their conversation was interrupted by a faint hum as a holographic display activated, projecting an image of a tribal gathering. The hologram showed a group of humans adorned with feathers, paint, and animal skins, surrounding a blazing fire as they prepared for battle. The image was hauntingly beautiful, yet filled with an unspoken intensity. The humans' faces, painted with determination, were a vivid reminder of the passion and fear that defined these ancient battles. Look at them, Zara whispered, almost to herself. They're so alive. There's something fierce in their eyes, something I've never seen before. Professor Kalar approached the hologram, his gaze lingering on the ancient warriors. That's the human spirit, Zara. These early conflicts were born out of necessity, but they also revealed something deeper. Humans possess a unique drive, a resilience that pushes them to confront challenges head-on. It's a part of their nature, woven into their history. As they continued their exploration, Zara's group reached a section focused on early organized warfare. Here, they encountered artifacts from the Mesopotamian and Egyptian civilizations, societies that had developed sophisticated tactics and hierarchies within their armies. Unlike the tribal skirmishes, these conflicts had evolved into large-scale battles, with strategic planning, formations, and ranks. One document, translated from cuneiform, described the organization of a Mesopotamian phalanx, a formation where soldiers stood shoulder to shoulder, creating an impenetrable wall of shields and spears. The Aryans were amazed at the complexity of this arrangement, a tactic that required discipline and coordination, qualities they hadn't associated with early human warfare. Interesting, Aaron remarked, studying the translation. They had already begun to understand the importance of unity, of working as one. Professor Kalar nodded. Precisely. As human societies evolved, so did their methods of conflict. They learned that strength lay not only in individual prowess, but in collective effort. It was a profound shift, one that would lay the foundation for even more advanced forms of warfare. Zara's curiosity grew as she studied the details of these formations, her mind struggling to comprehend the sheer willpower it must have taken to stand in such close ranks, trusting others with one's life. The Aryans, with their advanced society and peaceful ways, rarely engaged in anything resembling combat. To them, conflict was an abstract concept, far removed from their everyday reality. Yet here, within these ancient formations, Zara saw the beginnings of something profound. the realization that unity could be as powerful as any weapon. The group moved on, delving into records from early Egyptian and Greek civilizations, where warfare had become an intrinsic part of society. In these cultures, warriors were honored, their feats celebrated in song, story, and art. The Aryans found statues depicting soldiers, engravings of battles, and murals that commemorated military victories. Zara was particularly struck by a carving of an Egyptian chariot rider, bow drawn, speeding into battle with a fierce determination etched into their face. Combat was an art form to them, Zara murmured, tracing her fingers along the holographic outline of the charioteer. It's almost like they found beauty in war. Indeed, Professor Kelar replied, his voice somber. For many of Earth's early societies, warfare was not only a means of survival, but a way to define identity, strength, and honor. Warriors were revered and their deeds immortalized. These societies saw conflict as a way to prove their worth, to establish their place in the world. As they ventured further, the students encountered accounts of the Trojan War, a legendary conflict that mixed myth and history. The Aryans were fascinated by this blend of fact and fiction, a story of love, betrayal, and epic battles that captured the human imagination for centuries. Zara read with fascination, picturing the clash of swords, the sound of shields crashing, and the fiery resilience of warriors who fought for both ideals and personal reasons. Aaron, reading beside her, glanced over. This is extraordinary. They created stories, myths out of their wars. They made legends of themselves. Zara nodded, entranced by the depth of human storytelling. It's as if they needed these stories to understand themselves, to make sense of the pain and sacrifice. Professor Kelar, listening to their reflections, smiled thoughtfully. Humans have a unique ability to weave meaning from conflict. For them, battles are not just events but stories that define who they are. These legends serve as reminders of their endurance, a way to pass down lessons through generations. As the day wore on, Zara's group continued to study the evolution of early human warfare. They learned about the motivations behind these conflicts: territory, resources, revenge, and sometimes sheer survival. The Aryans were both horrified and captivated by humanity's willingness to endure hardship and loss, all for the sake of defending their homes, their loved ones, or their ideals. For Zara, each artifact, each ancient record, felt like a glimpse into the human soul. She sensed a raw power within these stories, a resilience that was both beautiful and terrifying. As they prepared to conclude their study of ancient warfare, Zara couldn't help but feel a growing admiration for Earth's early civilizations. They were a testament to survival, adaptation, and a fierce will that had carried humanity through centuries of struggle. As the group gathered to share their insights, Zara felt a deep sense of awe. Humans, she realized, were a species defined not only by their conflicts, but by their ability to find meaning, even in the face of war. Zara and her group ventured deeper into the archive, moving into a section that chronicled a transformative era in human warfare, the medieval period. This era, they would soon discover, was defined not only by advances in weaponry, but also by ideological shifts that fueled conflicts. Warfare had evolved from tribal survival to organized battles driven by ideas, beliefs, and an emerging sense of identity and loyalty. The students found themselves surrounded by artifacts from the Middle Ages, swords with intricate designs, shields emblazoned with emblems, and suits of armor that had once been worn by warriors. The Aryans were awed by the craftsmanship, as these weapons and armor were not just tools of war but works of art, carefully forged and crafted with purpose. Zara picked up a holographic display showing a medieval sword, its hilt adorned with jewels and detailed engravings. "It's beautiful," she murmured, tracing her fingers along the blade's outline in the hologram. "But it's strange that something so elegant was meant for battle." Professor Kelar, standing nearby, observed her fascination. "Yes, Zara. During this period, humans viewed combat as more than survival. It became a pursuit of honor, a testament to one's skill and bravery. Knights in particular saw themselves as protectors of their lands and people. Their weapons were extensions of their identities, symbols of their loyalty and purpose. The group continued through the medieval section, encountering artifacts from various parts of the world. The Aryans were struck by how different regions developed unique combat styles and weapons, each reflecting the values and needs of their society. In Europe, heavy plate armor and powerful swords became common, while in the Middle East and Asia, warriors wielded sleek, curved blades, reflecting their distinct approaches to combat. Zara's attention was drawn to a display about chivalry, an idea that fascinated her. The concept of knights adhering to a code of honor seemed almost mythical, a notion that defied the brutal reality of war. She read about knights pledging loyalty to their lords and the oaths they took to protect the helpless, uphold justice, and defend their faith. "It's as if they saw themselves as more than just soldiers," Zara said, her voice filled with curiosity. "They had ideals, principles they wanted to live by." Professor Kalar nodded. For many knights, the concept of chivalry provided purpose, a moral compass in a chaotic world. Their dedication to these ideals elevated them in society's eyes, making them symbols of hope and protection. But these ideals also led to conflicts that were driven by loyalty and belief, rather than pure necessity. The students moved to a section dedicated to one of the most significant conflicts of the medieval period, the Crusades. This series of religious wars, fought over centuries, left a deep and lasting impact on Earth's history. Zara read through accounts of battles between Christian and Muslim forces, both sides driven by a powerful belief that their cause was sacred and justified. As she examined these records, Zara felt a mix of admiration and unease. The intensity with which humans fought for their beliefs, the sheer conviction in their causes, was both inspiring and troubling. She tried to imagine what it would feel like to fight not only for survival, but for an abstract concept like faith. "These crusades, they weren't just wars over land or resources," she said, thinking aloud. "They were driven by something deeper, a need to defend what they believed was right." Another student, Lauren, nodded in agreement. "It's fascinating. They saw themselves as champions of their faiths. To them, these battles were more than mere conflicts. They were acts of devotion." Professor Kalar joined them, his expression serious. "Indeed, the Crusades illustrate a unique aspect of human nature. Humans often find meaning in something greater than themselves, whether it's religion, loyalty, or ideology. This can unite them in powerful ways, but it can also lead to tragic consequences, as each side believes their cause justifies any cost." Zara and her peers were further intrigued by the scale and impact of these religious wars. They came across detailed descriptions of the sieges, where massive armies surrounded and blockaded cities for months, even years, depriving inhabitants of food, water, and hope. The students found records showing the toll these sieges took on civilian populations, and Zara's heart ached at the accounts of starvation and suffering. "These sieges, they didn't just target soldiers," Zara whispered, her voice heavy with sorrow. "They affected everyone, the old, the young, families. They were forced to endure so much." "Yes," Professor Kalar replied gently. "This is one of the darker aspects of human conflict. War does not discriminate. Its impact touches everyone, even those who have no part in the battle. And yet, humans continued to fight, driven by convictions and beliefs they deemed worth the sacrifice." The students continued to explore, finding records of the 100 Years' War, another significant conflict that spanned generations. This war, fought between England and France, was driven by a complex web of politics, territorial disputes, and claims to the throne. The Aryans marveled at how deeply intertwined these conflicts were with notions of power, pride, and national identity. For Zara, the 100 Years' War revealed a new dimension of human conflict, one in which loyalty to one's country or king became a driving force. The records detailed battles where soldiers fought not out of necessity, but from a sense of duty to their leaders and homeland. They were willing to fight for something as intangible as national pride, Zara remarked, somewhat perplexed. It's incredible that they placed such value on identity and loyalty. Loran nodded, studying a holographic map that depicted shifting territories over the course of the war. They weren't just fighting for themselves, they fought to establish a legacy, to ensure that their culture and their people endured. As they discussed the implications of loyalty and pride, Professor Kalar encouraged the students to consider how these ideals shaped human societies. He explained that while these concepts often fueled conflict, they also fostered unity, inspiring humans to protect what they held dear. Even in the darkest times, humanity's determination to defend their values persisted. In another corner of the medieval section, the students encountered records of the War of the Roses, a civil war in England that pitted noble families against one another in a brutal struggle for the throne. This war illustrated how power struggles and personal ambition could drive entire nations to conflict, with alliances shifting and betrayals emerging at every turn. These conflicts are so complicated, Loran observed, shaking his head in disbelief. It's not just about two sides clashing. There are layers, alliances, betrayals, ambitions. It's almost like a game. Zara agreed, intrigued by the intricate nature of the conflict. It's almost like humans thrive on complexity. Their wars are more than just battles. They're woven into their politics, their families, their personal desires. As they concluded their exploration of the medieval period, Zara and her peers gathered to share their insights with Professor Kalar. They had come to realize that human warfare in this era was not simply about survival or territory. These conflicts were deeply rooted in ideals, ambitions, and identities that transcended individual needs. For Zara, the medieval period revealed a side of humanity that was both noble and flawed. The ideals of chivalry, loyalty, and faith showed humanity's capacity to aspire to something greater, to seek purpose beyond mere survival. Yet the violence and suffering inflicted in the name of these ideals reminded her of the dangers of unchecked belief. Professor Kalar concluded the discussion by encouraging the students to reflect on the lessons from this era. Humans are driven by forces that go beyond the physical realm. Their battles are shaped by loyalty, pride, and belief in higher ideals. But these forces, as noble as they may be, can also lead to destruction. As they moved on to study the next era, Zara felt a deep respect for humanity's complexity. She understood now that Earth's conflicts weren't simply acts of aggression. They were windows into the human spirit, revealing both the light and shadows within them. With the medieval era behind them, Zara and her group moved forward in their study of human conflict, entering a section of the archive dedicated to the Renaissance and the dawning of the Gunpowder Age. This period was transformative, marking the shift from close combat weaponry to the invention of firearms and cannons that would redefine warfare. For Zara, it was as if humanity's capacity for innovation had reached a new level, fueled by the Renaissance's advancements in science and thought. The students gathered around a holographic display showcasing an early musket, its rough, simple design standing in stark contrast to the ornate swords and shields of the medieval period. Zara marveled at the crude yet effective design, realizing that this weapon symbolized a turning point, a departure from the swordsmanship and chivalry of the past. Professor Kalar stood beside them, gesturing toward the musket. "This," he said, "is the beginning of a revolution in warfare. Firearms and cannons allowed humans to attack from a distance, making battles less personal but far more devastating." Zara studied the musket closely, imagining the chaos and fear it must have inspired on the battlefield. She thought of the soldiers who had been accustomed to close combat, suddenly facing weapons that allowed their enemies to strike from afar. The idea of such a transformation in warfare sent a shiver down her spine. So, with these firearms, combat became less about skill and more about firepower? Zara asked, looking to Professor Kalar for confirmation. "In many ways, yes," Kalar replied. "The introduction of gunpowder leveled the playing field. Knights in armor, once nearly invincible, could now be taken down by a single well-placed shot. Human conflict began to revolve around tactics, numbers, and logistics in ways it never had before. The group moved further into the display, observing larger cannon designs and diagrams of fortified city walls designed to withstand bombardment. Zara realized that humans had responded to these new weapons with innovations of their own, developing strategies and defenses to adapt to the changing nature of battle. Fortified cities, underground bunkers, and strategic positioning had become critical elements of survival. Aaron, one of Zara's fellow students, pointed to a large holographic map depicting the siege of Constantinople. "Look at how they used cannons to bring down the walls of this city," he said, impressed by the tactical use of such formidable weaponry. "It's as if each advancement in warfare forced humans to rethink everything: how they fought, how they defended, even how they built their cities." Professor Kalar nodded. "That's precisely it, Aaron. Humans have an extraordinary ability to adapt, to reshape their tactics and environments to face new threats. With each innovation, they changed not only the way they fought, but the way they lived." As the students examined records from the Renaissance period, they found accounts of human ingenuity that extended beyond the battlefield. The Renaissance, Zara learned, was not only an era of technological progress, but also a time of cultural and intellectual awakening. The Aryans came across detailed descriptions of how advancements in science, mathematics, and philosophy influenced military strategy. Engineers designed fortifications, inventors improved firearms, and mathematicians devised new methods for calculating artillery trajectories. Zara found herself captivated by the minds behind these innovations, individuals who saw beyond the chaos of war and sought to understand the mechanics and physics that governed their world. Leonardo da Vinci's sketches of war machines, for example, showcased a vision that merged art and science, even if many of his ideas never reached the battlefield. Even in times of war, they valued knowledge and creativity, Zara observed, studying one of da Vinci's intricate designs for an early tank. "It's almost as if they saw beauty in the very things that caused destruction." "Indeed," Professor Kalar replied. "For humans, conflict was not always about destruction. Often it drove them to push the boundaries of what they knew, to explore new realms of thought and invention. This duality, their capacity for creation alongside their capacity for destruction, is what makes their history so fascinating." The students delved into accounts of conflicts that reflected this duality, including the various Italian wars and the rise of professional armies. They studied how mercenaries and soldiers of fortune traveled from one conflict to another, their loyalties bound not by chivalry or faith, but by payment. This mercenary culture represented yet another shift, where the personal honor of medieval knights gave way to a more transactional approach to warfare. "It's as if their values shifted," Loran remarked, studying a manuscript on mercenaries. "They no longer fought just for loyalty or duty, but for survival and gain. War became a profession." "Yes," Professor Kalar replied, "and with that shift, wars became more complex, often tied to political alliances and economic interests. Humans learned to use diplomacy alongside their weapons, engaging in negotiations, forming alliances, and using military force to advance their ambitions. The Aryans continued their exploration, uncovering records of the Spanish conquests in the Americas, where guns, steel, and European diseases devastated indigenous civilizations. Zara felt a pang of sorrow as she read accounts of how entire cultures had been decimated, often without understanding what they were fighting against. The clash between European conquistadors and indigenous peoples was a brutal reminder of the power imbalance created by technological advancements. "These encounters, they were unlike the battles we've seen so far," Zara whispered. "It wasn't just combat. It was an overwhelming force, a collision of worlds." Professor Kalar observed her reaction thoughtfully. "Yes, Zara. In these encounters, technology met tradition, and the consequences were tragic. The people they conquered were not simply enemies, but societies with their own histories, beliefs, and ways of life. For the indigenous civilizations, these battles represented more than loss. They were the erasure of entire cultures. Zara and her peers grew increasingly reflective as they examined the Renaissance era's impacts on warfare and society. The advances in military technology had undoubtedly allowed humans to wage war with greater efficiency, but they also brought devastating consequences, especially for those who were unable to adapt quickly enough. As they approached the end of the Renaissance period, the students found themselves in front of a display on the 30 Years' War, a brutal conflict that ravaged Europe for decades. They read accounts of how the war had begun with religious motivations, but quickly expanded into a complex struggle involving multiple nations and shifting alliances. The 30 Years' War left a lasting scar on the continent, draining resources, spreading disease, and leading to widespread famine. 30 years of warfare, Aaron said, shaking his head. The destruction must have been unimaginable. It was, Kalar agreed. But in the aftermath, humanity adapted. They formed treaties, established borders, and began to understand the importance of diplomacy in maintaining peace. Out of this prolonged suffering came a desire for stability, a shift toward more structured societies. The students also encountered records from the early Enlightenment, a period that followed the 30 Years' War, and reflected a yearning for knowledge, reason, and reform. Zara sensed a spark of hope in these writings, a testament to humanity's resilience. Despite the devastation, humans had emerged with new ideas, new philosophies that emphasized reason over conflict. As they concluded their study of the Renaissance and the age of gunpowder, Zara and her peers gathered to reflect on what they had learned. They realized that while this era was marked by the introduction of devastating weaponry, it was also a time of profound intellectual growth. Humanity had learned to harness its creative energy for both destruction and discovery, a paradox that left Zara in awe. Professor Kalar gathered them, his expression thoughtful. This period shows us humanity's adaptability, their willingness to push forward even in the face of great loss. They used conflict to explore new ideas, to rethink their world and their place in it. In a way, their wars drove them to evolve, to become more than they were. Zara nodded, a newfound respect forming within her. They are remarkably resilient. For every weapon they create, they find a way to rebuild, to seek understanding. As the group prepared to move to the next era, Zara felt a growing admiration for humanity. She had witnessed their capacity to innovate in times of turmoil, to create beauty alongside destruction. The Renaissance had shown her that while war was a driving force, it was not the only force. Humans were more than warriors. They were thinkers, dreamers, creators, bound by a spirit that yearned for progress despite the cost. As Zara and her fellow students entered the next section of the archive, a somber atmosphere settled over them. This area of the archive was dedicated to one of the most devastating periods in human history, the World Wars. For the Aryans, who had rarely experienced large-scale conflicts in their own history, the magnitude and brutality of these wars was almost incomprehensible. The displays here were filled with haunting images, detailed records, and accounts of battles that had changed the course of humanity forever. The students gathered around a large, dimly lit hologram that displayed scenes from the First World War. Soldiers in heavy, mud-soaked uniforms moved through trenches, their faces weary and grim. The background was filled with the roar of artillery and the choking clouds of smoke from chemical weapons. Zara watched the scene with a mixture of awe and sorrow, feeling the weight of these soldiers' sacrifice. They fought in these trenches for years, Professor Kalar explained, his voice low and respectful. They endured unimaginable hardship, cold, hunger, disease, all for mere inches of land. This was a war of attrition, a brutal stalemate that claimed millions of lives. Zara struggled to process what she was seeing. The Aryans had never engaged in warfare on such a relentless scale, and the concept of trench warfare, with soldiers forced to live in such dire conditions for extended periods, was alien to her. She imagined the feeling of waiting, day after day, not knowing if the next moment would be one's last. They look so defeated, yet they keep going, Zara murmured, her voice barely audible. How did they find the strength to endure? Duty, loyalty, and a sense of purpose, Kalar replied. For many soldiers, these qualities sustained them through the darkest times. But even these weren't always enough. Many returned home broken, carrying scars that went far beyond the physical. As the hologram shifted to scenes of aerial battles and early tanks rumbling across barren fields, the students were introduced to the technological advancements that had reshaped warfare. Zara watched as planes clashed in dogfights above the battlefield, each maneuver calculated, each shot fired with precision. She learned that this was the first war where humans had taken combat into the skies, marking a shift in the nature of warfare that would only grow in scale and complexity. It's fascinating, Aaron said, studying the planes with a critical eye. They adapted so quickly, bringing combat to new dimensions, and yet, all this innovation was used to inflict greater destruction. Professor Kalar nodded solemnly. Indeed, the First World War taught humans a harsh lesson, that technology, once harnessed for progress, could also be used to wage unprecedented destruction. The shock of this realization left humanity deeply changed. The students continued, now approaching the section on the Second World War. This conflict, they quickly learned, was even more vast and devastating than the first. The archive displayed maps of troop movements, footage of bombed cities, and records of the relentless march of military forces across continents. The scale of this war was overwhelming, encompassing nearly every corner of the globe. A holographic projection showed soldiers storming beaches under heavy fire, an iconic scene from the D-Day invasion. Zara watched in silent awe, trying to comprehend the courage it must have taken for these young men to charge forward. Knowing they faced almost certain death, she felt a pang of sorrow for the lives lost, the potential snuffed out in the blink of an eye. These soldiers weren't just fighting for territory, Kalar explained. They believed they were defending freedom, protecting their families, and standing against tyranny. The stakes were higher than ever before. The students were silent, absorbing the gravity of these words. The Aryans valued peace and knowledge above all else, and they found it difficult to understand the drive that had led humanity to wage war on such a scale. And yet, they could see that for many humans, these conflicts had become about more than just survival. They were battles over ideals, struggles that reflected humanity's determination to fight for their beliefs, no matter the cost. The students moved on to another display, where the development of nuclear weapons was outlined in chilling detail. Zara's eyes widened as she read about the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the first and only use of atomic bombs in warfare. The images showed the devastation, entire cities reduced to ashes, thousands of lives lost in seconds, and the lingering radiation that haunted survivors for years. This is unlike anything I've seen, Zara whispered, her voice shaking. To think that humans created something with such destructive power. Professor Kalar placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. Yes, it was a tragic moment in human history. The devastation forced humanity to confront the terrifying potential of their own technology. They realized that with power came responsibility, and that this power, if misused, could lead to unimaginable suffering. The students were visibly shaken. The realization that humanity possessed weapons capable of wiping out entire cities, even civilizations, weighed heavily on them. For Zara, the thought of such a weapon being unleashed filled her with a profound sadness. She wondered how humanity could live under the shadow of such a threat, knowing that one act of aggression could end life as they knew it. As the display shifted to post-war rebuilding efforts, the students saw glimpses of hope amidst the destruction. Photographs of cities rising from rubble, children playing in the streets, and families reunited told a different story, a story of resilience. Despite the horrors they had endured, humans had rebuilt, piecing together their broken worlds and moving forward. They are resilient, Loran observed, his voice tinged with admiration. Even after experiencing such devastation, they didn't give up. They rebuilt and found a way to heal. Kalar nodded, pride evident in his tone. This is a defining trait of humanity, their ability to endure, to recover, and to carry on. The Second World War left deep scars, but it also inspired movements for peace, understanding, and unity. The very technology that caused destruction spurred humans to seek new forms of cooperation. The students found records of the founding of the United Nations, a global organization dedicated to maintaining peace and fostering collaboration. For the Aryans, who had long existed in peaceful coexistence, this was a profound concept. They saw how humans, recognizing the devastation of war, sought to prevent future conflicts through diplomacy and cooperation. Zara's gaze softened as she read these accounts. They learned from their mistakes. They found a way to bring people together, to work toward a common goal. Yes, Kalar replied. The wars showed them that peace is not something to take for granted. It's something to strive for, something to build and protect. As the students continued their study of the 20th century, they encountered the Cold War, a period marked by tension, espionage, and the looming threat of nuclear conflict. They read about the Cuban Missile Crisis, a standoff that brought the world to the brink of nuclear war, and about the delicate balance of power that kept humanity from the edge of destruction. Zara could hardly believe how close humanity had come to annihilation, and how fragile peace could be. They lived under the constant threat of destruction, Aaron remarked, awe evident in his voice, knowing that one wrong move could end everything. Kalar nodded. The Cold War was a reminder that peace is delicate, but it was also a testament to humanity's ability to negotiate, to seek alternatives to violence. The era was tense, but it taught them the value of diplomacy. The students finished their exploration of the World Wars and the Cold War, deeply moved by what they had learned. Humanity's capacity for both destruction and resilience left a lasting impression on each of them. The Aryans saw that, despite the horrors of war, humans possessed an incredible strength, their spirit to rebuild, to seek peace, and to grow. For Zara, these wars were more than just records of conflict. They were a testament to humanity's strength and vulnerability, a powerful reminder that even in the darkest times, hope remained. As the group gathered to share their reflections, she felt a deep respect for Earth's people. She realized that through these struggles, humanity had found the wisdom to pursue peace, and that, perhaps, was the greatest victory of all. The next section of the archive brought Zara and her peers into the era of modern warfare, an age defined not just by powerful weapons, but by rapid technological advancements that transformed the battlefield. As they walked past holographic displays and data panels, the Aryans encountered a world of cyber warfare, unmanned drones, and surveillance systems. In this new age, combat was no longer restricted to the physical domain. It extended into the digital, psychological, and even moral dimensions of human existence. A large hologram projected a drone hovering in mid-air, its sleek design and rotating camera eye scanning the ground below. Zara studied the display closely, intrigued by the machine's precision and efficiency. She learned that drones allowed soldiers to monitor and strike from thousands of miles away, reducing human exposure to danger, but raising ethical questions about the consequences of their actions. "It's fascinating," she said, glancing at Professor Kalar. "They've found ways to remove themselves from direct combat. But doesn't that make the decision to strike easier?" Kellar's face was thoughtful as he watched the drone hologram. "Yes, Zara. By introducing technology that distances humans from combat, they've changed the way they approach warfare. For some, this distance can indeed make the act of aggression feel less personal. Yet, it also brings new moral challenges. They must weigh each decision carefully, knowing that with greater control comes greater responsibility." Zara pondered the professor's words as the hologram shifted to scenes of soldiers controlling drones and surveillance tools from command centers. She found it both remarkable and unsettling that modern soldiers could impact lives from a distance, separated from the battlefield by walls and screens. The idea of warfare as a controlled, almost surgical operation left her questioning the true nature of conflict in this era. The group continued their exploration, arriving at a display dedicated to cyber warfare. Digital maps filled with flashing lines showed simulations of data breaches and network infiltrations, where battles were waged not with bullets, but with lines of code. The Aryans learned that in cyber warfare, entire nations could be targeted without a single soldier setting foot across borders. "This is warfare without a battlefield," Aaron observed, his tone one of astonishment. "They're not fighting for territory. They're fighting for information, for control of data." "Yes," Kalar replied. "In modern times, information has become one of the most valuable resources. With a single cyber attack, a nation's economy, infrastructure, or security can be compromised. The battlefield in many ways has become invisible, yet the impact can be just as devastating." Zara was fascinated and unnerved by this notion. She read about ransomware attacks that had paralyzed entire cities, hackers who could manipulate power grids, and cyber agents who infiltrated government networks. The concept of war without borders, fought in cyberspace, was difficult to grasp. It seemed to defy the traditional idea of combat, making the struggle for dominance an intangible yet powerful force. How do they know who the enemy is? Zara wondered aloud, examining a holographic display of anonymous hackers and state-sponsored cyber agents. In this world of invisible threats, how do they know where to strike, or whom to trust? Professor Kalar nodded thoughtfully. That, Zara, is one of the greatest challenges of modern warfare. In the cyber realm, anyone could be a potential threat, and enemies often operate in the shadows, difficult to trace and even harder to predict. It's a world built on mistrust, where the line between friend and foe can blur easily. As they moved further into the exhibit, the students found records detailing the psychological impacts of modern warfare. Reports of soldiers returning from recent conflicts, struggling with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, were especially poignant. Zara read accounts from veterans describing the difficulties of reintegrating into civilian life, haunted by the trauma of battles they had fought far from home. "These wounds are invisible," Loran remarked, reading a veteran's letter that described sleepless nights and flashbacks. "They carry these scars long after they've left the battlefield." "Yes," Kalar replied, his voice heavy with empathy. "For many, the effects of war linger in the mind and heart. Modern soldiers face a unique kind of struggle, one where the physical toll may be minimal, but the emotional and psychological tolls can be profound. They are often left to battle their memories long after the fighting has ended." The students grew quiet as they reflected on the cost of modern warfare, realizing that the pain of conflict did not always end when soldiers returned home. For Zara, these accounts gave her a deeper understanding of human resilience but also of vulnerability. In the past, war had left scars on the land. Now, it left scars on the mind. Moving forward, the students encountered displays focused on the ethical dilemmas surrounding autonomous weapons, machines programmed to make life-and-death decisions without human intervention. These weapons, ranging from drones to robotic soldiers, raised questions about accountability and morality. The Aryans learned that humanity was now grappling with the challenge of defining ethics for machines that could kill. "A weapon that decides on its own?" Zara asked, feeling a pang of unease. "How do they ensure that it makes the right choice?" Kalar's gaze was solemn as he studied the display. "That, Zara, is one of the great ethical debates of their time. Humans are beginning to realize that delegating these decisions to machines comes with risks they cannot fully control. The question of accountability looms large. If a machine makes a mistake, who is responsible? The students reflected on the implications of such technology, recognizing the risks involved in allowing machines to operate autonomously. For the Aryans, who valued intentional and ethical decision-making, this concept seemed fraught with potential for disaster. They saw that, while humanity's technology had advanced, Their moral compass was struggling to keep pace. The displays shifted again, this time focusing on the global impact of modern warfare, how conflicts displaced millions, creating waves of refugees and humanitarian crises. Zara and her peers read accounts of civilians fleeing war zones, forced to abandon their homes and start anew in unfamiliar lands. The Aryans were deeply moved by the resilience of these people, who carried with them the hope of building a better future, despite the trauma they had endured. "These are the true costs of war," Loran said quietly, gesturing toward a holographic image of refugees gathered at a border. "It's not just the soldiers who suffer, entire families, communities. They all pay the price." Professor Kalar nodded. "Indeed. In many ways, modern warfare has made it clearer than ever that conflict extends beyond the battlefield. The effects ripple through society, affecting people who never held a weapon, who never chose to fight." The Aryans were struck by the complexity of modern warfare, realizing that it encompassed not just physical destruction, but also the psychological, moral, and societal repercussions. In this age, warfare had become a multifaceted struggle, one that extended into the fabric of society itself. Zara could see that humanity's advances in technology had given them unparalleled power, yet that power carried consequences that often went beyond their control. Before they left, Zara found herself drawn to a display on peacekeeping efforts, missions led by international organizations aiming to rebuild, mediate, and bring stability to war-torn regions. She read about peace treaties, ceasefire negotiations, and humanitarian efforts, realizing that even amidst the chaos of modern conflict, there were those dedicated to healing and reconciliation. "Despite everything," Zara murmured, "they haven't given up on peace. They're still trying to make things right." "Yes," Kalar said, his voice filled with admiration. "Humanity's greatest strength lies in their hope, their determination to seek peace even after enduring unimaginable suffering. Their pursuit of peace is perhaps their most profound achievement." As the students concluded their exploration of modern warfare, Zara felt a deep respect for humanity's resilience. She understood now that this era was defined not just by advanced weaponry, but by the struggles that came with those advancements. Humanity was navigating a complex moral landscape, one where they balanced innovation with ethics, power with responsibility. In this age of cyber attacks, drones, and psychological scars, Zara saw that humans were not only fighting external battles, but also internal ones. They were contending with their own limitations, learning to temper their advancements with caution and humility. As the group gathered their notes and prepared to move to the final section, Zara felt a renewed sense of reverence. Humanity's journey was a complicated one, but amidst the challenges of modern warfare, they continued to strive for peace, resilience, and a better world. For Zara, that was a testament to the strength of their spirit, a reminder that even in the darkest times, hope and compassion endured. As the Aryan students entered the final section of the archive, they felt a mixture of awe, respect, and quiet reflection. They had journeyed through thousands of years of human history, bearing witness to humanity's most profound struggles and triumphs. This last area of the archive wasn't filled with weapons, documents of battles, or artifacts of war. Instead, it was a place of contemplation. It held the stories of those who had worked tirelessly to bring peace, of leaders, thinkers, and everyday people who had sought to prevent conflict and heal the wounds it left behind. The students gathered around Professor Kalar as he prepared them for their final reflection. "You have seen the breadth of humanity's conflicts, from their ancient battles for survival to the sophisticated, morally complex wars of the modern age. Now it is time to consider what all of this means, not just for humans, but for us as well." The students nodded, their faces serious. They had felt the weight of each era they studied, the sacrifices and choices that had shaped humanity's path. Now, as they prepared to share their reflections, they understood that their mission was not merely about cataloging knowledge, but about connecting with the spirit of another species. Zara was the first to step forward. She had felt this connection deeply, especially in the moments when she witnessed human resilience. "Humans are unlike any other beings I've studied," she began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "At first I thought they were simply a violent species, defined by their endless wars. But as I looked deeper, I saw that their conflicts were often driven by their capacity for loyalty, belief, and an unwavering hope. They fight not just for themselves, but for each other, for ideals, for futures they believe in." She paused, looking around at her peers. "In the medieval period, I saw how honor and chivalry transformed warriors into protectors. During the Renaissance, I witnessed how war drove innovation and discovery. And in the modern age, I saw how their technology made them powerful, but also forced them to confront the ethical consequences of their choices. Humanity isn't defined solely by their battles. They're defined by the lessons they learn, the hope they cling to, and the peace they continue to seek." Professor Kalar nodded, pride in his eyes. "Well said, Zara. Humans are indeed complex, and they continually adapt and grow, even through hardship. It is their resilience and spirit that make them remarkable." Loran stepped forward next, his gaze contemplative as he gathered his thoughts. "For me, the most surprising discovery was how much they question themselves. With every advancement in weaponry, every new conflict, they grapple with ethical dilemmas. They seek accountability. The invention of autonomous weapons and cyber warfare could have led them down a dark path, but instead, many of them are striving to use these tools responsibly. They constantly reflect on what it means to wield power, and they're aware of the cost." He gestured toward the peacekeeping displays nearby. "And even after enduring unimaginable devastation, they still try to mend what's broken. Humans don't just leave destruction in their wake. They build, they heal, they work to prevent future conflicts. It's as if their history of war pushes them to appreciate peace even more deeply." The students murmured in agreement, and Zara found herself reflecting on how different the Aryan approach to conflict was. Her own species had rarely engaged in large-scale conflict, and their societies were built on cooperation and mutual understanding. But observing humanity, she realized that perhaps peace held a different significance for those who had known war. Aaron spoke up, his voice filled with admiration. "I didn't expect to feel so moved by their courage. During the World Wars, millions of young people volunteered to face horrors we can hardly imagine. They weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting to protect their families, their freedoms, and their beliefs. And after each war, they somehow found the strength to rebuild, to come together, and to create organizations like the United Nations to preserve peace. They have this incredible capacity to hope, even after everything they've been through." Professor Kalar smiled warmly. "Yes, Aaron, you've touched on something essential. Humanity's courage is not just about facing external enemies. It's about facing their own inner conflicts, grappling with loss, and emerging with a renewed sense of purpose. They remind us that peace is something to strive for, to protect, and to cherish." Zara thought back to their visit to the records of the Cold War. The tense standoff, the threat of nuclear annihilation, and the fear that gripped the entire world during that period had deeply affected her. She couldn't imagine living under such constant dread, yet humanity had somehow endured, finding a way to prevent that conflict from escalating. They had turned to diplomacy, to negotiation, choosing coexistence over destruction. As they stood among the peaceful displays, the students realized that humanity's greatest strength lay in their willingness to reflect, to learn, and to change. For all their history of conflict, humans were constantly evolving, striving to build a world free from the violence that had once defined them. Professor Kalar gathered the students for their final thoughts. "What we have learned here is more than a history lesson. Humanity's story is a mirror, showing us both their flaws and their strengths. They are beings capable of immense destruction, yes, but also of profound kindness, resilience, and growth. Their journey from war to peace is one that offers lessons not only for them, but for all who encounter their history." He looked around at each student, his gaze warm and proud. We came here to learn, to observe, and to understand. And perhaps in doing so, we have learned something about ourselves as well. Peace is not merely the absence of war. It is an active choice, a path that requires commitment, empathy, and the courage to change. As they prepared to return to their ship, Zara lingered, looking back at the archive with a mixture of gratitude and respect. She felt that she was leaving with more than just knowledge. She was carrying with her a part of humanity's spirit, their struggle, their hope, and their resilience. Standing beside her, Aaron placed a hand on her shoulder. "They are not what I expected," he admitted, a note of admiration in his voice. "They're flawed, yes, but they're also extraordinary." Zara nodded, feeling a deep connection to this distant species. "Yes, they are. I think in their history I see parts of ourselves, the same potential for growth, for compassion, for resilience. They have taught us that peace is worth fighting for." With a final look at the archive, the Aryan students boarded their ship, carrying with them the stories, the lessons, and the legacy of humanity. As the vessel rose into the dark expanse of space, Zara felt a profound sense of purpose. She knew that they had only scratched the surface of Earth's history, but the journey had given her insights that would resonate with her for a lifetime. As they drifted away from Earth, Zara whispered a quiet farewell to the blue planet. Humanity's journey was still ongoing, and she knew that they would continue to struggle, to grow, and to seek peace just as her own species did. In this way, across light years of space and countless differences, they were not so different after all. And as the stars filled the viewports once more, Zara understood that through humanity, she had found not only knowledge but hope, a reminder that, in the vast universe, there was always the possibility for understanding, for unity, and for peace.